human beings like to create institutions in their own image and likeness. I mean, we think hierarchically, many of us, not all of us, but many of us think hierarchically, and so we want the church to resemble our thinking. I mean, we could argue historically the church becomes hierarchical in the 300s under Constantine as the Edict of Milan is proclaimed, and as Christianity becomes the formal state religion after having had its sanction lifted, and takes on the form and structure of the Roman Empire with the hierarchies that are resident in the Roman Empire, and takes on the thinking patterns and philosophies of the Greek influencers of the day. I mean, we could say that's where those kinds of ideas emerge, and we embrace them readily because they allow us to create a structure that's understandable, manageable, whatever the case may be. Patterns and systems are fine, provided that they don't become oppressive. And that's been, of course, the challenge, is that patterns and systems become in and of themselves quite oppressive. And they, instead of being liberative structures and understandings, they turn into the means by which people are enslaved. I mean, our conversation here around racism and enslavement and so forth, those kinds of things have happened throughout the globe. They're not unique to North America. They're not at all unique to America. They are part of the fabric of human societies around the globe, to enslave people and to racially classify, as we would say today, although they wouldn't be described in terms of racial terms perhaps in days gone by, but there would certainly be classifications. Some are better than others, and some are more important than others, and some have greater value than others, and so forth. And the church has certainly done that with the hierarchical structures that it has embraced, moving away from more flat structures or organic structures. Again, moving from organic to and dynamic to more static, more rigid structures has been a challenge. As people will say, race is a construction, but because it's a continuing construction, it's a reality. Even though in terms of the human beings are human beings who may have different tinctures of skin, different tones of skin, different colors of skin, different physiognomy, different featuring, etc., etc. Human beings are human beings, but we've constructed the idea of race, and so it's become very real. People say race isn't real. Well, it is real because we've constructed it, and we refer to it, and we make reference on a regular basis to different racial groups. So we've made it real. The work of the church is to, as it were, I think, look at the imago Dei, the image of God in all of humanity, resident in all of humanity by reason of being created beings, contained within those created beings by reason of the indwelling of the Spirit of God, and ask some questions then again about the nature of the body of Christ, the nature of the church. How do each of us, with our different featuring, our different colorations, our different skills, gifts, callings, etc., create that one organic reality that responds both automatically and autonomically, and also then in a very fluid way to the needs around us. I think that's what we're really being invited to do, and it strikes me that in that sense, race becomes something that we acknowledge has been a divisive force, and now seek to sublimate to the fact that the body of Christ, if you were to sort of visualize a single body, the body of Christ contains all of those images of humanity within it. And so when you look at Christ, you don't see that blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that you see in European images, but rather we should see a Christ that contains the the African, the African-American, the Euro-Canadian, the Euro-American, the European, the Asian, the Southeast Asian, we should see the images of Christ in those features and faces and reality, and even in the Texan. Yes, even in the Texan. May it ever be so, even in the Texan. But again, some of the trajectory we're on today, whether it be the church or otherwise, is largely dependent on the starting point. And starting point really does dictate to a certain extent the direction that you take and the means by which you will pursue that direction. And the church set out on a starting point, from a starting point that situated itself in some less than helpful ways, and as a consequence saw the future as an eschaton where all of the current realities are destroyed and replaced, and to some extent people imagined that might even include people groups that would disappear and be absorbed into a particular body politic that looked like, talked like, walked like, act like, and thought like they did. And so in Canada, for example, in the 1800s, they passed legislation to ensure that was so. The Gradual Civilizations Act dictated that British culture, language, etc., would be the normative focus for the development of Indian people. The Gradual Enfranchisement Act stipulated that at a certain point, given certain qualities and characteristics being resident in Native Canadian peoples, they would become enfranchised. They would have the right to vote. They would be legitimate citizens, etc. Same here in the United States. Same in South Africa. These legislations that sought to dictate people's identities and cultures and value. Those are all resident in this idea somehow that there is a utopian vision of humanity in the eschaton that looked like, walked like, and talked like Europeans, and that's where the racial constructions ultimately found a very warm and welcoming home. Pardon me?
How are we missing out on God?
Well, I think we're missing out on God in that we imagine, and it's an intriguing thing. In the Hal Lindsey days, the late great Planet Earth, the eschaton was that destruction. This is all going to be destroyed and replaced. So who cares? So the environmental movement says, "Oh my gosh, and the church responds, well, it's all going to be destroyed. So, the biggest concern is the soul of the human being. So let's go out and save souls and so forth." But we come to today, and there's a similar sort of ethos, it seems to me, in that many people envision the trajectory to be a utopian trajectory that we create by the work that we do. So we create a different ethos around race. We create a different understanding of the acceptability or lack of acceptability of a particular behavior or pattern or idea or whatever within the human community. So we will create that utopian vision. We will bring in the eschaton, et cetera, et cetera. And I think, the we. But I think somewhere between those two is perhaps a more comfortable reality where God is at work, inviting us to leave the decision about the nature of the eschaton in His capable hands, even as we work to bring about just outcomes by just behaviors and just attitudes and just actions. And justice is not simply about fairness. It's not simply about equality, but it's actually about this thing that the Bible talks about that we struggle with called righteousness, because justice and righteousness are the two sides of one coin, and our justice systems that fail to focus on the delivery of righteous behaviors and decisions and judgments and so forth are not acting justly. And so I think that some of what we need to be engaged in is to ensure that justice and righteousness continue to be conjoined on that one coin, so that as we flip over the righteousness side of the coin, we see on the other side this justice that in fact creates the righteousness that we desire to live in. So it's not a creation of our own, but it's based on this idea that God is at work bringing about God's purposes. The shalom of God, the shalom of the creator of all things, balance and harmony, etc., etc., justice and righteousness are integral to that.
You mentioned the gospel. What's the gospel? What is that?
Well,
is that like a brand?
A brand. Yeah, DKNY, and it's a great brand. No, well, I mean, the gospel is the good news that God Himself entered His own creation, and I'll use unfortunately the masculine pronoun because English doesn't have the gendered language is a struggle. Micmac, my own people's language is better because it's non-gendered, but so the Creator enters the creators. Let me put it that way. Then we can get rid of the Creator enters the Creator's creation, and for a time becomes a part of that creation. And as He becomes part, there I go again. See, you can't get rid of that thing. As Creator becomes part of Creator's own creation, there is this interesting transformation that takes place. The perfect enters the imperfect and seeds the imperfect with perfection, so that the trajectory towards that perfection can be set in place. So the imperfect that enters because of our first parents' willfulness to break covenant, to destroy the harmony in which all of creation had been made, to cause the shalom of God to be defaced. God enters, and God sets God's self in place as a part of God's own creation, to seed God's self into that creation, the perfect in the imperfect, bringing forth the abundance of perfection again, the righteousness and justice. So the gospel is about proclaiming that good news that we needn't live in the imperfection, but we can live into the restoration of harmony and balance, the shalom of God. We can live into that. We can choose, because of the Spirit's indwelling, because of the work of Christ, His person, work, life, teaching, death, and resurrection, we can live into the realization of the intent of God from the very beginning.
Christ, you say Christ's work, what is that? That's the dude that died on the cross or whatever?
That's the dude that died on the cross, yes.
Did Christ do something on the cross that we couldn't do for ourselves?
Well, again, our first parents, see, this is where people talk about our first parents committing a sin. They actually didn't commit a sin, they simply broke the covenant. So it wasn't a legal, moral issue. They broke the covenant, they broke relationship. And in breaking relationship, there are these three layers of relationship, and the multiple underscored layers within them that are damaged. And so they become less than the perfection in which they were created. And in order to restore them without completely effacing the whole thing and destroying it, which God said God would never do again, never seek to do again, although arguably I don't think it was about destruction anyway, it was about cleansing and purification in the flood narrative. God's decision not to destroy it completely and start all over again, it requires that somehow the perfection be reintroduced, so that, very much like you put good seed in the garden to produce a good crop, very much like Jesus' parable, the wheat and the tares, the good wheat sown in the soil, other stuff growing up with it. So you seed this good seed, and the good seed is the perfection of the life of a human being who would live into and renew the harmony and shalom of God. And that's what Christ did as he gave his perfect life for the imperfect, that it might be again made perfect. That's great news.
Okay, good.